best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others, says Mahatma Gandhi. On behalf of Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, in collaboration with Xavier School of Communications and Xavier School of Rural Management, cordially welcome one and all. Mr. P. Sainath is an author, activist, journalist, and teacher who started his educational career in a Jesuit institution, Loyola College, Chennai, after which he completed his graduation at JNU Delhi. His career as a journalist began in 1980 when he started working for United News of India, where he received the news agency's highest individual award. Ever since then, Mr. P. Sainath has been training millions of people in the field of journalism and media across various universities. To top it all, he is a holder of the Cody Chair in Social Justice at St. Francis Xavier University, Canada. Mr. P. Sainath is the first reporter in the world to win Amnesty International's Global Human Rights Journalism Prize in its inaugural year 2000. He is also the former Rural Affairs editor of The Hindu. He is a winner of the 2007 Ramnon Magsaysay Award, Asia's most prestigious prize for excellence. He has also won the World Media Summit Global Award for Excellence 2014 in public welfare reporting. Sainath has won so far more than 40 global and national awards. His book, Everybody Loves a Good Drought, has remained a non-fiction bestseller and is now in the 43rd reprint. The book is being used in over 100 universities in India and abroad. Sainath's work has been considered as conscience of the nation, and he has helped in bringing up a lot of policies for the rural poor. Mr. P. Sainath is the founder editor of the People's Archives of Rural India, aka PARI. The archive is an outcome of his 4 decades plus career in journalism, including a quarter century of reporting from rural India. In recognition of its extensive field reports, including climate change effects and the impact of pandemic on rural India, PARI has been awarded with Prem Bhatia Award for Outstanding Journalism in 2020 by Prem Bhatia Memorial Trust. The Xavier University family is very pleased to have such an eminent person among us who will be addressing on the theme Public Sphere, Rural India and Media Orientation. Dear sir, thank you very much for this great privilege. I also take this opportunity to welcome Professor Pepin, the Dean of Xavier School of Rural Management, who will be helping us during the Q&A session. He is also the founding Dean of the Xavier School of Sustainability and the acting Dean of the Xavier School of Governance and Public Affairs. Professor Pepin is also the Program Director of the Jesuit Worldwide Learning, JWL. He obtained his master's degree from Loyola College, Chennai, and completed his MPhil PhD from JNU Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Without further ado, may I now request our esteemed guest, Mr. P. Sainath, to enlighten and inspire us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. The topic you've given me, public sphere, rural India, media orientation. I'm determined not to deal with that as an abstraction. Okay. We all know that any kind of learning or attempt at learning loses some relevance if it's outside a context that is alive and important. And I always believe that, journalism, for instance, will be judged historically and maybe in our time as good or bad journalism, depending on how it engages with the great processes of our time. That's what has made some journalism great, some journalism good, and some journalism worthless. So it's really a question of the context, and more than most other disciplines, I think journalism becomes meaningless without the context. Let's look at the context in all three, in the public sphere, in the media, and in rural India. The first thing you need to reflect on is at a time when the public, when the Indian nation have never needed journalism more The public have never needed journalism and journalists more than they have these past few months. And it's at that very time that big media houses have sacked more than 1,200 journalists and thousands of non-journalist media workers. We don't have numbers. Please note that the champions of freedom of expression and freedom of press never publish in their newspapers or announce on their channels, hey, today we got rid of 240 journalists. The Hindustan Times alone acknowledges, that about 180 journalists got sacked. It made no announcements of these. Ananda Vikatan in Tamil Nadu, that group, 175 journalists gone in what they said is the first run, of sackings. Now, then there are others with 80 to 100. And then there are thousands of journalists not yet sacked whose salaries have been cut by 50% or more, not less than 30% in most cases. So you are looking at the media telling you, we don't give a damn. Please understand this. It's the richest, the biggest sections of the media. And Indian media companies rank amongst the most profitable in the world. They sit on huge cash surpluses, but they are the ones who are getting rid of journalists, despite, please note, that your Prime Minister and central government declared media to be an essential service. Remember, March 25th, the Prime Minister of the country, and if they can, having declared media, journalism, all this stuff, an essential service, if your media can go ahead and destroy thousands of families, it tells you that they have no fear of consequences from this government. They have no fear of consequences. They know that, what the PM said was for public consumption and that they can go ahead with their bloodletting as planned. This is not the first time this has happened. In the last 12 years, it's happened 3-4 times because media were anyway planning to dump a lot of journalists, were anyway planning to get rid of a lot of journalism, which does not create revenue for them. After 2008, after the Wall Street collapse, for instance, in the Wall Street collapse, those of you who were, I'm talking about the students now of Xavier's, you may have been too young to be reading our newspapers proclaiming that India had completely escaped the Wall Street collapse. Our markets were in great shape because of the fiscal prudence shown by Mr. Chidambaram. Complete nonsense, but this was the kind of stuff that was put out there. And at the same time, the publications which had a headline, one headline I remember, economy zooms back, Z followed by 8 or 9 O's. Economy, another economy soars back, and again, S followed by some 6 zeros. Yeah. At the same time, those very publications were sacking over 2,000 journalists between October 2008 and the elections of October 2009, assembly elections, and also the parliamentary election. Why would they pretend that nothing was wrong while killing journalists? But I'll come to that in a moment. 2016 November, December 2016. Remember something called demonetization? As soon as the demonetization was done, the debate goes on about what happened. Newspaper after newspaper threw out dozens, scores of journalists The Hindustan Times closed 6 editions. It shut down 6 editions. All these excuses were made. I mean, actions were taken, which they had planned on anyway. And gigantic events like this, which actually ought to spur you on to do more journalism, which ought to spur you on to try and explain to the public what's happening. Yeah, they did the very opposite. They used those events as a pretext and as an excuse to indulge in thousands of layoffs. Now, by the way, was it so important to lie about the 2008 Wall Street collapse that it didn't affect the markets at all in India? For a very simple reason. Between today, by the way, the Indian media, as of 2019 March, as of March 2019, the value of the Indian media and entertainment industry, and please understand, they are one industry. Media and entertainment are one industry, is as of 2019, I remember that the then minister, Smriti Irani, gave out that figure estimating that the value by 2020 would be 2 trillion rupees. That's 2 followed by 12 zeros in rupees. In 2019, when the estimate was made, March, that was about $37 billion at the prevailing rate of exchange. Now, a hell of a lot of this wealth is differently held from how it was held 20, 30 years ago. Indian newspapers were very, very rich in their tangible properties. In buildings, there are buildings in Mumbai which major newspapers occupy on rents going back to the early 1900s, okay? 1 rupee 50 paise per square meter, those kind of rents, buildings owned by the corporation, etc. By the way, a whole lot of multinational banks in the Fountain area work on rents that are more than 100 years old, frozen. Okay. Anyway, and then most, if you look at Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg in Delhi, you look at the Nariman Point in Mumbai, newspaper and media corporations own huge properties. And they had lots of other involvements, lots of other tangible properties. But as liberalization and globalization and privatization settled, as the world of the market took over, more and more publications, channels, media groups shifted from tangible properties to investments in shares and stocks, okay? Stocks and shares. And they also evolved certain very corrupt mechanisms like media treaties, private treaties in the media, which gave them payments for advertisements from companies, which gave them 7 to 10% of the shares of that company. This meant that your major media houses were holding shares in 200, 300 companies, all of which companies took a huge bath in the 2008 collapse. Those companies took a major bath, like all companies did in the 2008 stock exchange collapse. Now, here's the thing. I've got millions of shares in that stock exchange, which is sinking. Can I tell you the truth about it? Can I report the truth for you? No, I have a structural compulsion to lie. And that is the nature of corporate media. It has a structural compulsion to lie. If I say, hey, the Wall Street collapse is really pulling down our markets, it's smashing us, I'm going to be one of the biggest losers. My shares will not be in all those companies, will not be worth, and also I myself may have listed some companies of mine. My shares will not be worth the paper they were published on. So what do we have to do? We have to heat the market. We have to heat the market and talk about recovery and how it's soaring and how it's zooming back. I have to lie. Lie or die. Those were the choices. And I'm saying, by the way, this isn't for me. I don't look at this in terms of petty individual corruption. I'm saying it's an industry. That's how you are. This is who you are. This is what corporate media are about. Which, by the way, refers to 30 years of the Indian media. There's another 170 years of in which we were a very different media. I don't look at James Augustus Hickey and that kind of crap as Indian media. For me, I think we can trace back the first great Indian-owned publications to people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and the Miratul Akhbar, which, by the way, was in Persian, not Bengali, which was the elite language of the time. From that time to now, in another 16, 17 months, the Indian press will be 200 years old in the sense of an Indian-owned, Indian-launched, Indian-run press. Not the colonial powers press, which the Times of India and others represented at the time. And still do in the sense of representing the establishment of our time. So you've got yourself into a situation of corporate media where journalism is reduced to a revenue stream. Mr. Samir Jain very often used to say in the late 80s onwards, owner of the Times of India, one of them, that journalism is like any other business. Manufacturing toothpaste, automobiles, whatever, it's a business like any other. In fact, his brother went one step further in an interview to the New Yorker in 2012, when he said, we are not in the journalism business. The largest English newspaper in the world at that time was the Times. Now I think it's number 2, Times of India. Mr. Vinit Jain said, on record, we are not in the journalism business. We are in the advertising business. He told that to Ken Auletta, and you can read the review, October 2011 or 2012 of the New Yorker magazine. But here's the problem, and where I demarcate myself from corporate media, though what we call, it's very curious. What we call the mainstream media excludes the mainstream. It does not report the mainstream. It sells products to the mainstream, but it does not report the lives or anything of the mainstream. It excludes the mainstream, and we call it the mainstream media. However, so where the point of departure between the first 170 years of journalism in India, press in India, and the subsequent 30 years, I think Mr. Jain's pronouncement gives us a beautiful point of departure. Okay. Mr. Jain said, journalism is a business like any other, like toothpaste or automobiles or any other. I think and I assert that he's wrong, because here is a confusion that many people make. In our time, we need to make a distinction. I want all you journalism students to understand this. There is a distinction between media and journalism. These two are no longer the same thing. Please understand it. Media is about structures, institutions, commercial entities, business. Journalism is quite something else. Journalism is about quite something else. So what is the point of departure there? Mr. Jain is right, is right to this extent. Newspapers are a business. TV channels are a business. Media houses are a business. Media conglomerates are a business. Private radio stations are a business. Private portals are a business. Journalism is not a business. Journalism is a calling. That's what it is. Who were our journalists? Who dominated that 170 years of journalism? Can you think of one of them who presented himself as a businessman or ever saw himself like that? Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Mahatma Gandhi, Bhagat Singh, um, Baba Saheb Ambedkar. These were people who were not just journalists, they launched newspapers and magazines. Gandhi 3, Ambedkar 2, Ram Mohan Roy 3, Bhagat Singh, who, and many people don't even know this. We never teach our journalism students this. We all recognize Bhagat Singh as a great martyr, political activist, revolutionary, all true. We don't recognize that he was professionally a journalist who earned his living from journalism. And please tell me, how many journalists do you know of anywhere in the planet who wrote in 4 languages, learning knew 2 other languages, was learning one more, but wrote in 4 languages, Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and English, could read a little bit of Persian, appreciated Persian poetry. A journalist who wrote in these 4 languages and who, while in prison for those 170 days, for 190 days, well, whatever, less than a year in prison, went on a hunger strike for his right to borrow books from libraries to continue his writing of the jail. Do you know how many books Bhagat Singh borrowed for his notes? 312. Okay, 312. 87 in Hindi, the maximum, about 167 in English, the rest in Urdu, Punjabi, 17 books in Bengali. He didn't write in Bengali, but he taught himself the language while underground in Kolkata. Here is a man writing in 4 languages in God knows how many publications. We know of 4 because in many other publications he wrote under pseudonyms, right? But we know that he wrote in the Akali in Punjabi, in Veer Arjun in Hindi, in Pratap, in Kirti, where his political writings came, Akali in Punjabi and Kirti in Hindi. Here is a journalist who would not be recognized as a journalist today because we've accepted corporate definitions of what journalism is. Here is a person writing in 4 languages, learning 2 more, and hanged by the age of 23. Every time I think of him, I think, for God's sake, I started my career at age 23. I joined UNI at age 23. And here is this man who has done all this by age 23. Published thousands of pieces. God knows how many things we don't know he wrote, but we have a huge amount of his material nonetheless. So here is your tradition of journalism. Was it business? Was it commercial? Was Gandhi? Yeah, Gandhi was a baniya, right? So was his journalism commercial? Did he see the founding of each of his publications as a commercial venture? No. They saw journalism as a calling. Now we have shifted the fundamental philosophical and structural basis of journalism from something serving the public to serving the revenue needs of a private corporation. Obviously, it is stupid to expect that we can, continue with those values on this structure. You can recapture that journalism, but it cannot be within these structures. We need an entirely different approach to journalism, which, by the way, can be justified and is well embedded within this country's constitution and our rights as citizens. So this is one set of things. Second, at the very time that the media are sacking journalists, throwing them out. The bulk of the remaining journalists, what are they covering? Yeah, Sushant Singh Rajput, this sort of stuff. And uh, please notice, speaking of rural India, on September 25th, on September 25th, the day farmers protested across the nation, how the media were led away from the farmers' protests. That was the day the government got the Election Commission of India to announce the Bihar election dates. Now, these dates had been decided a long time ago. They could have been announced 1 week before, they could have been announced 1 week after. But the Election Commission at short notice said, we will hold this date, announced dates on 25th September, after the farmers had announced the date of their protest. Second, on the 25th of September, the Narcotics Control Bureau issued more notices to more Bollywood stars. Karishma Prakash, secretary to Deepika Padukone, was summoned, and more little stars and starlets were also summoned. Most of Mumbai's media, especially television, were parked outside where the summons was, where the stars had to appear before the Narcotics Control Bureau. And God knows how many media crews and cars were following Deepika Padukone in Goa as she went for the airport to come to the Mumbai for the next day. Yeah, this is how your media function. It shouldn't surprise you. It should shock you. I hope it never ceases to shock you. But it shouldn't surprise you, because this is journalism as a revenue stream. And people don't understand. It's not one bad, idiotic anchor. We have no shortage of bad, idiotic anchors. I mean, I think we are, we have a huge number of them. But you need to notice that Talk TV is a revenue model. Now, suppose we were to cover, let's say, one suicide of Sushant Rajput. How much coverage did that get as compared to the latest NCRB numbers on farmers' suicides, which brings farmers' suicides since 95 to more than 330,000. More than 330,000 farmers have committed suicide, most of them in distress, since 1995. Okay. Now, it sounds obscene to you. I know that. It sounds obscene to you, but it sounds perfectly logical to me. That Sushant Singh's suicide will get more space than the figure of farmers' suicides reaching 330,000, because, okay, here's the deal. In 2006, when I was covering the farm suicides at their height, one of probably the worst year ever in Vidarbha, many young journalists in the Times of India appealed to their management. They said, here is a newspaper from Tamil Nadu covering Maharashtra in such depth, and the Marathi newspapers are reproducing this guy. Why don't you let us cover the Vidarbha farm suicides with that kind of depth? They got a memo. They received a memo which said, dying farmers in Vidarbha do not buy our newspaper. The elites of South Bombay do. What they were also saying, without using those words, is that the readers of the elite South Bombay readers, buy the products of our advertisers. Right? The hungry farmers and farm laborers of Vidarbha do not buy the kind of products that our advertisers sell. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. It was journalism as a revenue stream. Third, if we look at Talk TV, Every day in your on your television screens, you have 5 people yelling at each other, jumping all over the place, screaming, invective, you know, absolutely obscene, disgusting behavior, because talk TV is an excellent revenue model. What does it cost? You get 5 people there, 2 or 3 of them are party representatives. They don't even get any payment for it. Let's say all 5 of them are given payments of between 3,000 rupees to 5,000 rupees. 15,000 rupees, you have done 1 hour of programming, man. 15,000 rupees was your cost. That's nothing. Chicken feed. Now let's say you wanted to cover the farm crisis. You wanted to cover the agrarian district. It would mean sending out different correspondents to the different areas of distress and crisis. It would mean that these correspondents spend time, as some of you know, I have spent sometimes in a year more days in Odisha, in Koraput and Kalahandi and Bolangir than I have in my home in Mumbai. There have been years when I have spent that much time. It takes that much time. It takes that much understanding. It needs talking to thousands of people. It involves travel expenses, stay expenses, logistical costs. It takes money. Okay. It's a high input investigative journalism from the field. Field reporting is a high input, high labor demanding, high labor intensive, high intelligence requirement phenomenon that takes money. Talk TV is a low intellect, high decibel, low content, zero content operation that makes money. Good journalism takes money. Horrible journalism makes money. Do you know one of the founders of CBS News, the guy who was president of CBS News, Alfred F. Friendly, Fred Friendly, once put it so beautifully. He said, there is no incentive at all for television to do its best when there is so much money to be made from doing its worst. Why shouldn't we do our best? There's no money to be made in doing our best. There is so much money to be made in doing our worst. We can't afford to do our best. That's what Fred Friendly, one of the great, I mean, he was one of those pioneers who actually engineered television news. That's what he had to say. Now, the public sphere. So one is that you're looking at media. The fundamental contradiction of our time in media is the growing disconnect between mass media on the one hand and mass reality on the other hand. I'll come back to that when we're looking at the current context and situation. Okay, so between mass media on the one hand and mass reality on the other. You can see that whether it's in the Sushant Singh Rajput versus farmers' suicide, you can see that in 1,000 cases. It's not just Sushant Singh Rajput case. There's one or two every year, but this time it had a greater edge to it because the media have grown that much worse, and the stakes are higher. The third, and I'm going to tell you something. What is the lesson of the first 170 years of journalism in India? And indeed, the lessons of journalism in all colonial situations, in all situations of oppression. To my mind, the one journalism that has value is the journalism. Look at who we are talking about. Gandhi, Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh. Each of these individuals, Ram Mohan Roy, each of these individuals, what did they represent in their societies? In engaging, or a Tilak, what did they represent? They represented dissent. They represented that connection between mass media and mass reality. They had very small circulations, very small print orders. They had moral authority and the knowledge that they were speaking for those who were shut out of the media. That was a mainstream media, however tiny it was. And this is the paradox of Indian journalism. In the first 100 and say, in the first 100 years, in the first 100 years of Indian journalism, or let's say 47, so 120 years of Indian journalism, a tiny media, a tiny Indian media performed a great social function. Okay, so great was this social function that the British Raj feared it. Who were these guys anyway? Print orders of 500, 200, print Gandhi at his height, print orders of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Why did the greatest empire on earth worry about them? Yet in 1893, you can read a book by the Reuters special correspondent, S.H.M. Merriweather, S.H.M. Merriweather, in which he says in the introduction, in the very introduction, he says, and it shows you how objective and independent Reuters was. He was sent to the tour the famine districts. That's the name of the book. A tour of the famine districts in India in the 1890s to reply to the noisy riffraff of the nationalist press. That was nationalist, by the way. That nationalism had a very different meaning from that we have shoved down our ears today. Yeah. Look at the fact that such a tiny press, a Tilak with a few hundred copies, a Gandhi had not even begun. All these little pamphleteers could place the world's mightiest empire on the defensive. A tiny press played such a massive social role. Today, the paradox, a gigantic Indian media plays such a narrow social role. Right? Mass media without masses. The masses are passive. You give them stuff. Yeah, you sell them products. You don't. It has to happen, by the way, when diversity disappears, when media are narrowly controlled. And please don't think of internet and social media as something incredibly different. They are the largest monopolies in the world. Digital monopolies are the largest media monopolies, and they are greater monopolies than any monopolies of any kind, any sector in history on one single count. They are greater than the Rockefellers and oil. They are greater than the old Mughals of media in one single thing. 5 companies now, as you know, 4 or 5 companies rule the world. And these 5 guys have one thing that distinguishes them from all earlier monopolies. They own, trade, and sell your personal data. That gives them a power over our lives that no one ever had. Rupert Murdoch in the print days, for all his ability to prop up governments and pull down governments, never had this power. Look, any one of you, huh? You write to your friend, I'm planning to go to Brazil or Sao Paulo in Brazil for a holiday to meet my distant family relatives up. You know what happens next? Your inbox, your Gmail, your everything is flooded with ads for hotels and resorts in Sao Paulo, right? If you make every purchase you make on Amazon, you are given an incredible amount of ads, an incredible amount of stuff, suggested further purchases, everything. So please don't think of these guys as, I need you to stop interpreting media in the abstract or as fourth estate. They are closer to real estate than fourth estate. Okay. analyze them as you would other sectors of the corporate world, other sectors of profit-seeking industries. In fact, they're a lot worse in many ways, because what they do, they cover their commercial interests with a veneer and sheen of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, yeah, all that stuff, only when it comes to themselves. When their commercial interests are threatened, they come forward with freedom of speech. In other words, freedom of speech belongs to, as A.J. Liebling said, freedom of the press belongs to those who own one. It's not freedom of expression for the journalists. It's not freedom of expression for those who field reporters. It's freedom of expression of the Malik and the owner of the media. So this is now the public sphere. And I'm saying it now. The only journalism that mattered, that made Indian journalism so great, as that of many other countries, which were colonies, was the journalism of dissent. The journalism of dissent. My hero in journalism was the child in the story who stood up and said, "The emperor has no clothes." That was the first great reporter, because he said what everyone else could see, but he put it out there in the public domain. Okay? He said, while everyone was admiring the fabric of the emperor's cloak, he said, "Hey, that guy is starkers. He's naked." Yeah. And then, of course, it broke through that wall of self-delusion and self-deception and fear. I always say that the first great reporter was that child who said the emperor has no clothes. Okay. Now, dissent. Let's look at the public sphere. We've just had a Supreme Court judgment that creates a society of designated dissent. Where the Supreme Court says dissent and democracy go in hand, but dissent must only be allowed in designated spaces. So to have the right to dissent, you must first assent. You explain this to me, please. Anyone wants to explain this to me? To be able to dissent, I must first assent that my right is limited. Now tell me, let's go back to Gandhi. Let's go back to the Mahatma. When his dissent in the Dandi March, in the Salt Satyagraha, all of it came by precisely challenging designated spaces. His actions were based on challenging designated spaces. That's what dissent is about. And that's why, guys, all you guys who are going to be journalists, I'm telling you this. I believe personally that you are entering an incredibly exciting and challenging time. An incredibly exciting and challenging time, because when the Supreme Court gets around to designating spaces in the public sphere, dissent in journalism is going to be 100 times more important. Dissent in media is going to be 100 times more important. We also already have our designated spaces, right? And they are very few. They do not include the major conglomerates and houses of media, but there are spaces. You're going to have to speak for those who are not allowed to dissent because that is not a designated space. I cannot believe, I find it incredible that the court could say, designated spaces. Now, here's the wonderful thing. The very authorities against whom I dissent will decide where I should be allowed to dissent. It eviscerates the entire meaning of dissent. Please find me one philosopher in history, one philosopher who's, whether right-wing philosopher, left-wing philosopher, whoever, find me one philosopher, great philosopher, someone whom we all would accept as a great philosopher, who creates a theory of designated dissent where your protest is contingent on my allowing you a space to do so, which you will stick to. I think the public sphere has shrunk. And with that shrinking of the public sphere, our responsibilities as journalists, not as media workers, as journalists. Remember the difference between media and journalism. Our responsibilities as journalists have gone up incredibly to be able to say the emperor has no clothes, to be able to say that this is wrong, to throw out these old stupid, doctrines, equal space for rubbish and truth. One guy says it is raining in Bhubaneswar. Another guy says it's not raining in Bhubaneswar. The simple thing for you to do is to look out of the bloody window and figure out if it's raining, right? But instead of which you will write a piece saying, this source says this source says this, the truth lies somewhere in between. Forget this. This is absolute crap. Journalists do not have a right to tell untruth or to strengthen untruth. You do not have that. Yeah. Facts do not always add up to truth. Your quest is one for truth also. And so you, as I said, so you've looked at, now look at rural India. But before that, one little point. In 2009, now you're looking at the rating scandal, right? Oh, the sheer innocence of it. How horrible. Man, what I'm trying to tell you is that corporations controlling journalism, you're not seeing corruption in an industry. When corporates control journalism, corruption is an industry. Because maximization of profit is the simple and fundamental principle of corporate function. So you'll do what it takes to make that money, right? So as we go more and more monopoly control over media, in 2009, I'm very proud of the fact that I broke the story on the front page of the Hindu, November 29, 2009, on paid news in this country. Some of you are too young to know about that scandal, but it consisted of showing that not individual journalist corruption, but most of the major news houses in this country, who I named and shamed in that piece, and all sorts of threats of legal action came. Nobody I knew would make the first move to the court because of the garbage from the audience tables that would burst forth onto the media world. They all went on to TV to threaten me with legal action. Go back and look at Lokmat's director threatening me, saying we will take legal action. The story was about Mr. Ashok Chavan, then Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and his election accounts, and how paid news was an industry. It was not an aberration. I'm trying to, again, I want you to understand this. When corporate media is functioning, we can't do without this media right now. Like we can't do without, we can't, however bad we think the system of education is, we still send our kids to school. We still send our children to college. Yeah. We hope and try that they will do something different, that some places are better than other places. Likewise, the responsibility here comes in on all of us. How we function within the shrinking spaces, how we expand. The challenge, there are two challenges before you as journalists in our time. How do we expand the public sphere within private forums? How much can we push the envelope of public interest in privately owned forums? It's a great thing to do, and I guarantee you that one day it will lead to your being unemployed, okay, as it has to thousands of journalists in history. But it is the thing to do. Yeah, if you believe in yourself as a good human being, journalism is also about that. The second thing, and the struggle for every working journalist, the struggle for every one of you who will go out there. Am I saying don't work for these people? I won't say that, because I don't have an alternative job to offer you, man. If I had a job to offer you, I'd say don't work for them. I don't. What I'm going to tell you is, I want to see how you handle that struggle of every journalist in the media today, which is, how do we sell our labor without selling our souls? That is the challenge for a journalist. How do I sell my labor without selling my soul? It is a challenge that you will face in your career of the next 30, 40 years or so, or more. I hope, by the way, you never stop struggling. I hope that you never stop reflecting on this. There will be many defeats and few victories. Yeah. But each time something changes, maybe immeasurably. And then sometimes something changes dramatically in a wide and special way. And it happens in a ridiculously short space of time. Okay. So how do I sell my labor without selling my soul? That is the question a journalist asks herself or himself. And that is the way. In fact, what you're doing is getting into a theater of guerrilla warfare. I call it guerrilla journalism. You do what you can get away with. When they burn one forest, you run to the next. When you get sacked from one place, you try the next. All this happens. But that's always going to be a struggle. How do you not sell your soul? Now, the last part of what I wanted to say to you is, look at the fact how our media have covered the migrants crisis and the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the figures and data of the Center for Media Studies, Mr. N. Bhaskara Rao's CMS in Delhi, showed us figures available up to 2016, after which the situation has only gotten worse, that the average national daily gives 0.67% of its front page to rural news. That's a 5-year average. And because it's a 5-year average, 0.67% is an inflated and exaggerated figure. Why? Because one of those 5 years is election year, when coverage will go up to 8-10%. If I remove election year from those 5 years, it's 0.18 to 0.24%. If we take individual years, you can see that in the CMS data itself. So you can see that even in the CMS data. Now, after you've sacked 1,200 journals, how much space are you going to have for rural media? Even less. How much coverage are you going to have? Even less. On the day, now the government tells us, and the media don't challenge a thing the government tells us. We really don't know how many people went out as migrants. We don't have the data. On every simple, important question, they have said, no data available. In fact, one of the jokes on the net now is NDA stands for no data available. That is, I mean, that you've all seen that on the net. Now, how absolutely untrue this is, but you refuse as media to call the bluff and say the emperor has no clothes. Why do I say this? On March 31st, the Solicitor General of India told the Supreme Court, presenting an affidavit of the Union Home Secretary, as of today, March 31st, 11 a.m., there is not a single migrant on the streets. There is not a single person on the streets or highways. On April 12th, the same Solicitor General, on the very same Solicitor General, and the very same Union Home Ministry's data said, well, yes, some 14, 15 lakhs of people have been counted. 1 crore of people have, 1 crore of people, 1.3 crore have been fed at food camps. Those who said on March 31st that not a single person was there. Then, um, um, and then, yeah. So then the Shramik trains began on May 1st. Already, millions of migrants had started walking. That was the one thing the media could show something of, because they were walking out of the cities. Your TV crews escorted them till the border of the city and showed that they were walking home. Now, remember that your media in the last 20 years there is not a single newspaper or channel that has a full-time labor correspondent. When I joined journalism in 1980, every newspaper had a labor and employment correspondent. Remember that today your media does not have a single farming correspondent. I mean, farming is different from agriculture correspondent. We have people called agriculture correspondents. They cover the agriculture ministry, they cover the agriculture minister, and they cover agribusiness. They do not cover the mandi, they do not cover the sowing, they do not cover the harvest, they do not cover the weeding, they do not cover the operations of the farmer. They do not try seeing the world through the eyes of the farmer or of the farm laborer. So you do not have a single full-time correspondent for farming and labor, which means you are saying, when you do that, you are saying 75% of the population do not make news, except in election year. And that's why we are so bad at understanding what is happening in an election, because we don't have specialized coverage of them. The newspapers which don't have a single full-time farming correspondent in the field, which do not have a single labor correspondent, each of them will have 10, 12 people covering various aspects of business. Investment banking, public sector banking, futures, okay, stock exchange. They have a dozen correspondents covering that, but not what farmers are doing, what laborers are doing. Come back to this problem of the migrants. May 1st to May 26th, railways gave us a figure. 91 lakh migrants were taken aboard the Shramik trains. That's a minimum figure, not a maximum. And if you count the remaining 5 days or 6 days of May, it means more than 1 crore people traveled in just the month of May. We're saying no data available. That railways gave that data. And before that, millions had walked out. Not less than 2 crores of people have moved in what is the largest movement of human beings in history, recorded history at one time, in one situation or season together. We also have, but we never asked the question. We kept asking, why are they leaving? We never asked the question, why did they leave the villages in the first place and come here? The reason they left the villages and came here is what we call the agrarian crisis. As millions of livelihoods and occupations were destroyed in the countryside, they came to the cities. This is what journalism ought to be about. In the People's Archive of Rural India, with which I will end for you, in the People's Archive of Rural India, please see that we didn't discover migrant laborers on March 25th. We cover them around the year, 365 days a year, in a section called Rural in the Urban, of migrant laborer communities everywhere. Please know that People's Archive of Rural India publishes in 12 languages, including Odia. Please know that we carry no advertisements. We do not want to be part of the media that is just there to hook young people and sell them products. Please know that there is no subscription fee. Please know that students can participate in a special section we have called Pari Education. Okay? I need you. We need you. You need us. We both need each other. This is the alternative. This is the way I won't even use that grand word alternative, but this is another path. This is a path where we can do that journalism if you will support us there. So I think that I've taken that hour, and we can have the questions, and I would request that you read out 2-3 questions to me, and I'll answer 3 at a time maybe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the thought-provoking and enlightening and inspiring words. The floor is now open for an interactive session with you. May I now request Professor Pebin to take over. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Sainath, thank you for this inspiring, provocating, and also inspirational talk that you have given to us. For me personally, I'm challenged, so are my students. I have not seen any questions coming on the chat box. So what I would like to...
Chat is disabled. Chat is disabled.
Yeah, so anybody who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand, and then if you can put it on the gallery mode. Don't put it on the speaker mode, keep it on the gallery mode so that we can see most of them. Yeah, Richard, can you do that?
Yes, sir. There is one question from Abhishek Raut.
Yeah.
Yeah, will you please introduce yourself and ask the question to sir.
Good evening, sir. I am Abhishek Raut from Urban Management and Governance. So, sir, as you rightly pointed out, the lacunas in the present media houses and all those things. So, sir, what shall be the role of the Press Council of India, and what shall be the new sort of implications from the government of India, and so that that will be more streamlined, sir.
Okay. Can we take?
Yeah, maybe two more questions, then the sir can answer all the 3 together.
We can also take a question from Smriti Suresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. It has been a very grateful experience for us to learn a lot from you. And I've been a follower of Pari Network for a long time. And seeing all your extensive work really inspires me to do the kind of journalism. But the question what I have for you is, let's just say I'm trying to cover a rural area, or I'm trying to bring out a story that would really help the person, like the one example where you took a street vendor and you help them with funds. So if I am supposed to do it as a journalism student, what kind of sources do I need, or how do I contact people who are not in internet connectivity? How do I do that? How do I reach out to them?
Maybe one more question.
Yes, sir. We can take the question from Niladri Sanyal.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I'm Niladri Sanyal from Rural Management, 1921 batch, sir. Sir, I have a question regarding the rural aspect of this entire talk that you have given, sir, and it is mainly with the policy making. So what is the main reason behind this lack of policy making, or rather this apathetic attitude of the government towards farm distress, and especially the migrant workers, as you talked about the agrarian crisis, sir?
Yeah, okay. Abhishek, the Press Council of India is pretty much a toothless institution. It has no powers to penalize beyond recommending that government advertisement should not be given to a paper, or a general guideline saying that people should not advertise in this newspaper or whatever, but that's very limited. It can't do much. Second, it does not cover the new different kinds of media that have come up. Yeah. There has been for a long time, a discussion on the need for a larger media council. That discussion is taking place in many forums. I don't know what will come of it. I am involved in one of those discussions on how do we strengthen press freedom, but how do we also look at regulatory institutions. And I think that is going to happen. It's going to be an extremely difficult job. You know, one of the things that I'm glad you asked this, because it comes out that I missed something. I said on the one hand, corporate media are sacking those very kind of journalists, hundreds of them, who might be able to cover rural India. They won't sack the ones who cover Bollywood and industry. They'll sack the ones who can do some other stuff. Yeah, who can't cover those. At the very time that the corporate media houses are devastating journalists in this way, this has also been a period, the last few years, particularly the pandemic period, when government after government is filing FIRs against journalists under God knows how many laws. Do you know the kind of laws under which journalists are being arrested or having FIRs filed against them? Sedition, you're all aware of, which itself is a colonial device. Yeah, Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. But journalists have been arrested, have had FIRs, charges filed against them, whatever, under the Epidemics Act, under the Disaster Management Act, yeah, under terrorism charges, unlawful activities prevention of whatever act, yeah, UAPA, yeah, whole communities, whole states have had their internet shut off. How do journalists function? Yeah. Now and the decisions are being taken by anyone, any deputy superintendent of police, any inspector of police, any DM of a town. Look at how the DM of Hathras behaved. Look at how the DM of Varanasi, the Prime Minister's constituency, went after journalists for a verified and authentic story showing Musahar, Musahar, the poorest Dalits, Musahar children eating grass. The DM then goes on to a Facebook with his own child feeding his own child grass. I think, by the way, that was an extremely crude and anti-child action on which serious action should be taken against the person. But the FIR, now in Tamil Nadu, a portal, 3 people end up under arrest at the police station because their portal, which is a city-based portal in Coimbatore, says that the main hospital here is functioning without proper protective equipment for the doctors and nurses. Now, where did that story come from? It came from the doctors and nurses. Yeah, and they were arrested under charge of, spreading rumors in the disaster situation, etc. So you're having, on the one hand, good journalists are being smashed by their owners and newspapers and channels. On the other hand, they're being squeezed out of the public sphere by this sort of absolutely random action. In fact, the government has set up a committee to look at why India has fallen so badly in the index rankings on press freedom. For instance, Reporters Sans Frontiers. Why have they fallen so badly? We are at rank 142. Don't even ask which countries are above us. You'll be appalled. to know how low we rank. And we've lost 2 ranks every year for the last 4 years. So the committee, of which I, by the way, am a journalist representative, is looking into that situation. And it's clear that we need both a protection of freedom of expression and a regulatory body that is more effective than the Press Council of India. And that's the debate and discussion that's going on. I am saying that you cannot have, it has to have changes in laws and accountability for the citizenry as a whole. You cannot have an arbitrary society, a society run on arbitrariness and impunity, and a journalism run on a free press. You cannot have an unfree people and a free press, or vice versa. Right? The two go together. Both together make a democracy, or are part of a democracy. So that's a major struggle. I thank you for asking me that question. I should have told you about the FIRs, arrests. There have been more than 75 FIRs filed, I think, in the last 6 months against journalists. Smriti Suresh has asked about trying to cover rural areas. The first thing about covering something, Smriti, is to go to the spot. Yeah. Don't cover it from, as many columnists do, from cut and paste of what you get on the net. Okay. In the People's Archive of Rural India, Smriti, every report is a field report. We don't have an opinion page because we understand, we are not hypocrites, that every journalism, every work of journalism will have some reflection of our values and objectives. It will. Yeah. We are not zombies who can switch off the thinking function while doing reporting. The very reason, see, when you say, I want to cover that small vendor, you're already taking a decision and a choice and a bias. Please be honest about it with your readers. Why are you covering the small vendor and not Bollywood? Yeah, I'm so delighted that you want to cover the small vendor. For that, we have our process, our motion, our mission is called the everyday lives of everyday people. Yeah, we don't cover celebrities. And while we talk to experts, we don't foreground the experts. We foreground the voices of that vendor. He is an expert for me on vending in the street, not somebody who did a PhD on it. Okay. Now look at the way journalism functions. If Odisha has if Kalahandi has a problem in food, and most people still wrongly project this image of Kalahandi as a food deficit area. Kalahandi is a huge surplus food production area. It has had major catastrophes once or twice in a decade. Its problem is not nature and food production. Its problem is exploitation, indebtedness, usury, yeah, all those sort of things. And what happens? Suppose there is a major failure, a major drought, a crop failure. Reporters from Bhubaneswar rush to Kalahandi, or from Delhi, or from Raipur. And who do they go to? Immediately they go to the district collector. Now this district collector is seen as some incredibly authoritative source. The district collector may be somebody who spent 3 months there, who is a IAS officer whose home state is Rajasthan, the very opposite of what Odisha is. A woman who has, the woman farmer who has tilled the land and done the seeding of that land for 45 years, she is for me 1,000 times the authority that your district collector is. Okay? She knows a hell of a lot more than farming. She has forgotten more about farming than your district collector who might one day go on to be agriculture secretary, will ever learn in his life. This idea of who we privilege as authorities and sources is now Pari has just done a 21-story series for UNDP on climate change. Every one of these stories has been done through the lived experience of ordinary people. Fishermen, fisherwomen, pastoral nomads, the Brokpas in eastern Himalayas, the Changpas in western Himalayas, the Fakirani Jats of the Kutch desert, pastoral nomads, okay, the farmers of millets and groundnut in Anantapur and Rayalaseema, from each and every agroecological zone, always sticking to the principle. We had many experts speaking, but the dominant voice is that of ordinary people. You need to go, and it calls for spending time, it's price, understanding the world through that person's eyes and experience. That's when, that is your source. And for data on that, that depends on the individual story you're trying to do. You can consult us. We'll be happy to help you. 3, Niladri asked about the policy and farms. Actually, Niladri, it's very simple what the policy is. The agrarian crisis in 5 words. 5 words. Corporate hijack of Indian agriculture. Okay. Remember that this is not about Modi government alone. From 1991, we proceeded on the principle there are too many people in agriculture. Remember Mr. Chandrababu Naidu's report done by the infamous McKinsey, Vision 2020. First chapter tells you we need to get 40% of people off agriculture. So you got 40% people of agriculture in some areas. And where did they go? Where do they go? Did you create a single job in these last 28, 30 years of these reforms? Did you create, is the farmer coming out of, is the farmer giving up on agriculture in Koraput, coming to Bhubaneswar? Is he about to find a job in Infosys or Tata Consultancy? Is the farmer leaving Mandya in Karnataka likely to find absorption in the Silicon Valley of Bengaluru, which is 45 minutes away? Yeah. You'll find farmers from Mandya in the big corporate IT giants. They are working as canteen workers serving chai. People who have, look, I don't know of any production. I do not know of any occupation. I do not know of any skill more important to the human race than the production of food. I do not know of any skill or occupation that is more important. What have we done to the status of that farmer? You want to remove people from a sector, you must have something to absorb them. You must have some options for them. We never did that because our aim was not so much to look after them, but to hand over agriculture to the corporate sector on the principle that 97% of population in agriculture, look at USA, 1% of the population or less is in agriculture. They're producing food for the whole country. Yeah, fine. So we throw out 97%. What are they supposed to do? Lie down and die? No. They came to the cities, other villages, became your domestic servant and my domestic servant. And those are the people who were walking back during the migrants crisis. The agrarian crisis in 5 words, corporate hijack, every sector of agriculture, barring direct ownership of land. And now the 3 bills are going to move us further towards even that. Every sector of seed production, who controls seed, farmer or corporation? Who controls pesticide, farmer or corporation? Who controls fertilizer price, farmer or corporation? All policies were made towards breaking control of family farming, of families over farming, and substituting it with corporate control of farming. So that is what your farm distress is about. We killed not only farming, we killed millions of allied livelihoods. Please understand, most of the wonderful experts who gas on TV don't know the difference between agriculture and agrarian. Please understand what is agrarian. Everybody in agrarian society is not an agriculturist or a cultivator. That is agriculture. Farmers, farm labor, that is agriculture. Agrarian is the larger society that is dependent on agriculture, that is dependent on how the agricultural economy is doing, though they are not cultivators, much less landowners themselves. And even the great economists, the dons of Colombia, Jagadish, Bhagwati, and Panagariya, write this nonsense in their book. 53% of Indians are farmers. They're not. Less than 8% of Indians are farmers, according to your census of India. That is 95 million farmers we have. 53%, because they don't know the difference. Experts are not required to be subject to challenge. They don't know the difference between farmers and people dependent on agriculture. The weaver, the potter, the fisherman, these are all people who are dependent on the agriculture. Inland fishermen, they're dependent on agriculture. Do you know that the first suicides from 91 were not of farmers, they were of weavers, because the farmers are the first market of the weavers. When agriculture collapsed, remember, 73 farmers of Pochampalli in Andhra Pradesh committed suicide. The weavers of Pochampalli were the first wave of suicides in this country that began in 91, 92. Farmers came later because farmers had some food. Many of them had some food to consume, not much. The farmers had that problem. Your tailor, your mechanic, your village mistri, the guy, see, the village carpenter is someone who makes, what does he do? He makes bullock carts. He does carpentry work for the farmer. Typically, the mistri in the village, every village will have 2 carpenter families, 2 mistri families. Typical, or every cluster of villages will have 2. Every mistri gets his payment, maybe 30%, 1/3 in cash, and 2/3 in produce. So many kilograms of cooked sabzi or vegetable, or just vegetables. So many quintals of rice and wheat, right? They get paid in that way. When the farmer goes bankrupt, the village carpenter starves. So you will find weavers committing suicide and starvation deaths amongst the village mistris from 91, 92, 93 onwards. Andhra Pradesh, next door to Odisha, is a huge example of this. How many carpenters, the classic case of Bangaru Ramachandru in Nalagonda district, committing suicide because of, not suicide, he starved to death. Sorry, he starved to death. So all those allied populations, all those allied occupations, together with agriculture, is what we call agrarian. It is bigger than just cultivation. Agrarian refers to 53% or more, not agriculture. Agriculture, the total number, 2011 census, full-time farmers, that is main cultivator, as classified in the census, was 7.8 or 7.9% of your population. Agricultural, then marginal cultivators, that is those who are farming for less than 6 months. Main cultivator is someone 180 days and above. Marginal cultivators less than 6 months, they come, add them, from 8% it goes to less than 10%. If you add all agricultural laborers, all kinds, comes to about 23, 24% of the population. The remaining 30% are all your allied occupations and allied livelihoods. Okay, so all these took a gigantic hit with one anti-farmer policy after the other. We diverted credit from farmers to agribusiness. You have a huge credit crisis. So that is really in the framework of the economic policies we set out for ourselves, which are about those of a corporate-led state. Thank you.
Perhaps you can take one more
maybe,
question.
yeah, just one more question, then we can.
From Ashokta Panda.
Good evening, sir. My name is Ashokta Panda, and I am from the first year of Rural Management course. Sir, my question is a bit specific in relation to the designated spaces that you said as reported by Supreme Court, in which there can be dissent. So, sir, as of now, I want to get a bit more clarity. So I'm asking it in respect to Bankura district of West Bengal. A few of us are trying to search upon empowering some 30 tribes of that place. So, sir, over there we see different things happening, and to do research again, it is we do not get a lot of materials at that place, and finding out dissent again over there through the pandemic by making just some online interviews, it is also being difficult. So, sir, finding, we know that that dissent exists, but to know more, to get better and to connect better, we are not able to get a proper way, and we do not know how we are going to proceed further. So, sir, can you please help us understand in this aspect?
You know, Ms. Panda, the first thing is there is no substitute for field work. I'm sorry. There is no substitute for field work. Ultimately, maybe you will be hampered for a few more months, but you will have to go beyond your online interviews. As I speak to you, our correspondents are in the rural areas, are traveling in rural areas, will be traveling. 3 of them will be traveling to Bihar very soon, yeah, who are not from Bihar. Ultimately, the research of people's daily lives gives you, I mean, why is it, I mean, you don't give a PhD to somebody who hasn't done a stitch of field work, right? I'm saying there is no substitute for that. That was recognized long before a pandemic. The pandemic, what it does, actually, it does a brilliant autopsy, a terrific post-mortem, showing us the kind of society we are and our inequalities. Now, Bankura, wonderful place, actually, if you ask me. We have stories and videos on Bankura because Panchmora in Bankura district is incredibly famous for those red terracotta horses, right? That's Panchmora is. Have a look at, I think the question is by understanding how people are living, understanding what their economics is, understanding what it was a few years ago as it is now, understanding what other jobs are they doing in order to stay alive. Every poor person does 3 jobs or more. We find people who are part-time construction laborers when there is construction, part-time on NREJ, part-time agricultural laborers. You need to understand that a farmer in Bankura is not just a farmer. He'll probably be doing now other things in order to survive. The average income of a farm household in this country, the last data available, National Sample Survey Organization 2013. Average income of a farm household, which is 4 to 5 people, probably 5, from all sources, not just farming, 6,426 rupees a month across India average. I mean, that would mean, by the way, states like Punjab and Kerala, where it is 15,000 a month, and states like Western Odisha, Chhattisgarh, where it will be 3,000 a month. And then you get an average of 6,004. And that 6,426 is not just the income from farming. It is the income from all sources of that farmhouse, other work that they do. So you need to look at what are the different livelihoods that they are partaking of in order to keep that farm going. Typically in India, a farm, maybe the old man, patriarch, or the eldest son will be on the farm. 3 sons will go out, migrate. One will be an LIC insurance agent in one city. One will be a primary school teacher 3 districts away. One will run a taxi in Mumbai. They send remittances back to the home. And when the crop comes, they get a share of the produce. That's how most of our farms function. With remittances from outside, from other towns, other cities. And very few farms are able to subsist entirely, at least small and marginal farms are able to subsist entirely on that, though they are more productive in agriculture than bigger farms, though they are. Now, I think you need to start building there are ways of tracking. Are you in conversation every day? Are you finding out what that woman's role is in what you're trying to do? She is the best person to tell you about household expenditures. Are you trying to collate the number of hours of unpaid work that women in Bankura do? You will be stunned by the kind of volume of unpaid work that women do in this country. So don't look at it only through the potter actually making the pot, but through the woman of the household. This January, the ILO told us that across the world, every ILO data analyzed by Oxfam told us that across the world, every single day, women and adolescent girls do 12.5 billion, billion with a B, 12.5 billion hours of unpaid work. A lot of it care work. Do you know 12.5 billion into 365? Do you know the value that that creates, that unpaid work, if we take a minimum wage value across the world? The value of that unpaid work is greater than the top 5 IT super giants put together. Several times greater. Or at least greater. Okay. So you need to start finding ways of constructing different ways of looking at what's going on. But in the end, you are just going to have to go there, live there, work there, track them, understand their lives as they live. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
On behalf of our university, I would like to thank you. I would like to stress upon just one sentence that you made, that you and I have a calling. I think that is what I want to tell my students, tell my colleagues, and everybody who is attending this great conversation with Mr. Sainath. Let us examine ourselves whether we have a calling. If yes, what is that calling? I think the message is very clear to us. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Pepin, for those wonderful words. And thank you, Sainath sir, for your words of inspiring message and thought-provoking enlightenment. May I now request Anisha to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Xavier University family. Anisha, over to you.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this intellectually illuminating session. A wholehearted thanks to our esteemed speaker, Mr. P. Sainath, for accepting our invitation and enlightening us with his thoughts. Sir, it has indeed been an honor to have witnessed and heard from you. The years of association with Pari and the Xavier School of Communications with student projects and internships since 2017 has been really overwhelming and fruitful for us. Special thanks to Ms. Zahra Latif, Community Manager Pari, for making this possible and being the bridge of communication between Team Pari and Xavier University Bhubaneswar. On a special note, we would yet again extend our heartiest congratulations to the entire team of Pari for bagging the Prem Bhatia Award 2020 for their coverage on climate change and the impact of the pandemic in rural India. Thank you, Dr. Father Anthony R. Uvari S.J., Vice Chancellor, Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, Father E.A. Augustine S.J., Registrar, Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, Father Anthony Raj S.J., Deputy Registrar, Father V. Arogyadas S.J., Chief Finance Officer, for the constant support in all our academic endeavors. Thank you, Professor S. Pepin, Academic Dean, Xavier School of Rural Management, for a brilliant Q&A session and for the collaboration with Xavier School of Communication. Thank you, Dr. V. Vijay Kumar, Acting Dean, Xavier School of Communications, for providing us all the opportunity and the platform to learn, explore, and grow. Thank you, Professor Arpita Saha, Faculty, Xavier School of Communications, for coordinating and constantly being in touch with Mr. Sainath's office to have him on board for us. We extend our warmest thanks to the faculty members of Xavier School of Communications, Xavier School of Rural Management, and all the faculty and staff of Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Thanks to Mr. Pramod Saha and Mr. Ratiram for the technical support and planning. Thank you, dear alumni and students of Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, for being a part of this extraordinary session. Thank you, dear participants, consisting of eminent scholars, researchers, academicians, and students from universities across India for being a valuable addition for the session. Also, thanks to Father Vivian for the smooth flow of the event. We hope everyone had a great experience and we are looking forward to more such engagement. This is Anisha Kar from Xavier School of Communication signing off. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you, Anisha, for those words of gratitude. And thank you, sir, for this wonderful interaction that we had with you this evening. And I wish all of you a very good evening. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sainath.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the participants.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It's indeed.